We're here to idea everyone, to fire up your curiosity and connect you with the people and ideas that shape our world. Watch, listen, understand, connect, create. Let's move the human story forward together.
Hello and welcome to The Poetry of Science, a podcast which provides insight into new scientific research via the medium of poetry. I'm your host, Dr. Sam Illingworth, and each week I'll be introducing you to some of the latest scientific findings and sharing a selection of science-themed poetry. After all, we could all do with a little bit more poetry in our lives. In this episode, I'll be exploring new research, which has found that after Hurricane Harvey, the residents of Houston were exposed to more chemical pollutants than normal. After the floods, the ruins return. Spoiled sites of contaminated waste flushed out by cleansing waters of heaven's rage, filthy muddied streaks smear their scent against the pale and blotting frame of fleeting second skins. Invisible impurities diluted in the deluge of our drowned and broken lives. This poem is inspired by recent research published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, which has found that after Hurricane Harvey, local residents were exposed to increased levels of chemical pollutants. Hurricane Harvey was a devastating Category 4 hurricane that made landfall on Texas and Louisiana in August 2017, causing cataclysmic flooding and more than 100 deaths. Harvey made landfall 3 times in 6 days, with 2 feet of rain falling in the first 24 hours. At its peak on September 1st, 2017, 1/3 of Houston was underwater as flooding forced 39,000 people out of their homes and into shelters. According to the National Hurricane Center, Harvey caused $125 billion in damage, making it the second most costly natural disaster in the history of the United States, behind only Hurricane Katrina. In total, Hurricane Harvey damaged over 200,000 homes and ruined over 1 million vehicles beyond repair. It also flooded 800 wastewater treatment facilities, spreading sewage and toxic chemicals into the water. Damage to 13 Superfund sites, polluted locations in the United States requiring a long-term response to clean up hazardous material contaminations, as well as to chemical plants and oil refineries, further exasperated this pollution. Although at the time when the hurricane took place, little was known about which chemicals Houston residents were potentially exposed to. In this new study, researchers used silicone wristbands to attempt to measure the extent of chemical exposure to local residents caused by the hurricane. Silicone wristbands absorb chemicals from the air and from skin contact, making them a useful screening tool for such research. Wristbands were worn by local residents shortly after the storm and again a year later, with the results compared so that a baseline could be approximated in order to better determine which exposures were increased by Hurricane Harvey. The wristbands recorded exposures to 162 different chemicals, including pesticides, flame retardants, and many other carcinogens and harmful pollutants. On average, 75% of the chemicals were found to be in higher concentrations immediately after the hurricane, therefore highlighting the additional and often unseen harm that can be caused by such catastrophic events. Now that you've heard the science, let me read the poem to you again. After the floods, the ruins return. Spoiled sites of contaminated waste flushed out by cleansing waters of heaven's rage. Filthy, muddied streaks smear their scent against the pale and blotting frame of fleeting second skins. Invisible impurities diluted in the deluge of our drowned and broken lives. In this section of the podcast, I like to share a poem written by another poet on a topic related to the science that has been discussed so far. In this episode, I'll be reading The Storm is Over by Jason Gurriel. Jason Gurriel is a Canadian poet and critic who was born in Toronto in 1976. He graduated from York University in Toronto, earning a BA in 2004 and an MA in 2006. Gurriel is the author of Forgotten Work, published in 2020, a verse novel written entirely in heroic couplets, as well as the poetry collection Satisfying Clicking Sound, published in 2014, and The Pig-Headed Soul, a collection of poems, essays and reviews that was published in 2013. Gurriel won Poetry Magazine's Frederick Buck Prize in 2007, becoming the first Canadian to receive the honour, as well as the magazine's Editor's Prize for Book Reviewing in 2009. The Storm is Over by Jason Gurriel. But now it's raining below the greener clouds of trees that were absorbent, but only up to a point. And these raindrops, strained by treetops, should, you would think, be filtered and finer and therefore pure, and not Chinese water torches, fatter, darker drops that always pick out of all possible bullseyes your bald spot. But these are late, last drops, and a little bloated, like late, last poems, by Name Your Poet. Thank you for listening to the Poetry of Science.
Thank you very much for being with us for this episode of the ideaXme Show. ideaXme is a global platform. Our mission is to move the human story forward by sharing knowledge of the future. You can find us on all major audio networks at www.radioideaXme.com, on YouTube and Vimeo. Please subscribe.